I stand on this stage tonight because one man had an idea. And that man was Crosby Kemper, and his family, BB, Sandy, and Christine, was a part of that process. I don't know whether the rest of you know what you were doing on September 18th, 1996 at 7 a.m. in the morning, but I was eating a bowl of Cheerios, drinking a cup of coffee, reading the business section of the Kansas City Star. And it says, Kemper challenges Kansas City. So I'm reading down through this article, and down here somewhere it says he's going to form a new Kansas City-based agriculture organization called Agriculture Future of America. And I was smiling to myself, thinking that is the dumbest idea I ever read. Handed it to my late wife, Judy, and said, read this. There's no way on earth that'll ever work. That was on September the 18th, 1996. Michael Shirley is in this room somewhere, I think. Michael, if you are, yell. I thought he was going to be here. Michael Shirley is a headhunter. Good one. He worked for UMB. Kemper, Sandy, and Crosby engaged Michael to do a search to find someone to be in this role. So my message here, first of all, for all you young people, is there's something valuable we do at AFA that we call the network. So my story here is going to get us to the network. I was the National Executive Director of the Campfire Boys and Girls Organization, perfectly happy doing what I was doing, and Michael calls me on the phone and says, I need to talk to you about this Agriculture Future of America job. And I said, hey, I read the article. I am not interested. He said, well, you need to think about that. I'll call you back in 2 or 3 days. So this went on for a week, 2 weeks, honestly. I actually went on vacation with my friends, the Williamses, who are back here, to Mexico, and told Michael not to call me. So I came back from vacation. You ever go on vacation, any of you in the corporate world, and you come back and that first day back is pure hell? Well, that was my first day back, and that was the day that Michael called. And I said, okay, Michael, I'll meet you for lunch, because this has not been a good day. That was about October the 10th. A few days later, Sandy and I were having a meeting, and then a couple of days later, Sandy and Mr. Kemper and I were having a meeting about this discussion this organization called Agriculture Future of America. And we were walking down the hall on the 6th floor. Sandy, you probably don't remember this, but anytime Sandy and Crosby were together, even when we were having a staff meeting, we talked a lot about financial stuff. Josh, you've been there, you know. And they were having this whole dialogue, and I was here, I think, on the interview, and they're talking banking stuff, and I finally said, gentlemen, if you are looking for someone with a banking financial background, I'm probably not your guy. But Crosby, I do understand collateral. And he said, oh, really? What's that? And I said, well, I've understood collateral ever since I was 5 years old. I grew up on a farm up at Canesville, Missouri. Oh, Canesville. I know, George Thompson. I mean, we were off on this whole discussion that Crosby knew all about Canesville and the bank, and then we got back to my story, and he said, well, so what about collateral? And I said, well, when I was 5 years old, my dad took me with him to the Canesville Bank. We got to the door and we stopped, and he said, son, I want to teach you a lesson here today. You see that cow shit on my boots? when I go through that door, it's called Collateral. Crosby turned to Sandy and said, I think we got our man. The next 30 minutes over lunch, we talked about all the bank investments in cattle that had not done well or had done well. At the end of that point, I had an understanding of a man who had a vision, a family who was willing to support that vision, and I was being invited to be a player in taking a canvas that hadn't existed before and painting a picture. And I look here and I see the picture. 700 young lives. All of you over there that have been around more than 4 years, will you stand up? Stand up. Come on, guys. These men and women are the reason, all of you, that I do what I do. I love this job. We talk about having, and back to the oriented about getting paid. You might want to know that I don't really work. We talk about having a job that you love so much that it's not work. That's my job at AFA. I don't feel I've ever worked a day because I've had the opportunity to create, to imagine, to motivate, be motivated. Nobody gets more motivated by being around a group of audiences of young people like this than I do. So when we think about the value of the network, I did not find out why Michael Shirley kept calling me to do an interview. He called all those times and I kept saying no, 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 no. Then one day I was weak and he said yes. I said yes, and next thing I know, I've taken the job. Well, along about 20 years ago right now, I started to work and went to we were actually working out of the bank. Sandy was the president of the bank at that point. I showed up at his office and he said, oh my God, you're here. What are we going to do with you? And so we found a conference room that was empty, but it was scheduled for lots of meetings. So we got a rolling cart, a cardboard box with 5 files, and a telephone that we could plug in and out in the room, because whenever the meeting was scheduled, I had to get out of the room. And so I would take my rolling cart, a plug-in phone, and sit in the hall and wait until the meeting was over, then I could go back and do business. A bit of a humble beginning for someone who had at one time managed 50 or 60 staff people, had 3 assistants working for us to keep the schedule going when I was at National 4-H because I traveled all over the world, etc. And suddenly, I used to say to the staff when we used to talk about a staff meeting. My first set of staff meetings was in the mirror. I liked those because they didn't talk back near as much as Mark Stewart does. But Mark told me I wasn't supposed to mention his name up here tonight. Now, the person that balanced that all out was someone that's been around for a long, long time, and that's Nancy Barkas. So she never talked back at me. She just looked at me like I was crazy and said, are you sure about that? Anyway, back to the first office. And sitting there one day going through these files, I found this little card about like this. And in that little card was, Crosby, if you're going to do this thing, hire Russ Weathers, signed J. Dillingham. Now, most of you in this room, that doesn't mean a thing. But J. Dillingham was, if you will, kind of like Crosby, the godfather of agriculture in Kansas City, because his family had owned the Stockyards Company for years and years and years, and the Kemper family had been on the board, and they had been lifetime buds, if you will. So what I found out after that It wasn't so much that anybody was interested in Russ Weathers for the job, but that Crosby was committed to his friend Jay to go see the candidate that Jay had suggested. And so because of a network, and by the way, Jay Dillingham's son, John, is one of my best friends, so it's kind of an inside deal, so to speak. So the whole idea of building our networks, and the reason many of you are here, and we try to do the things that we do at AFA to build that network, perfect example of how that worked out. Recently, I heard a story on the radio coming to work. A teacher of kindergartners is watching her 5-year-olds diligently working away. And this one little girl is so intense that the teacher goes over to her and says, "What are you drawing?" And the little girl looks up at her very proudly and says, "I'm drawing a picture of God." And the teacher said, "Well, none of us know what God looks like." And she said, "We will in a minute." That's kind of where we were in December of 1996. We had that canvas, and we were drawing a picture of agriculture, future of America, but nobody knew what it would look like. So today, we begin to see the face of 20 years of work. But the thing that's most important is this theme, that history starts now. Because every time each one of us comes to the next plateau in our lives, history starts now. So this is a plateau for this organization. I'm excited about that plateau and that transition. I have the great fortune of having a terrific board of directors to work with, a fantastic staff that is dedicated and is committed to this organization as anybody could ever dream of from a staff viewpoint. I think any of you folks on the board would attest to that. And then the privilege of having, as one of our vision, that we value leaders, young leaders, as a resource. It was something that was really important to Mr. Kemper. Know your customer. Pay attention to your customer. Our college students, what do they say about, and the board asked that today, what do you guys think? How are you evaluating? How are you giving data back into the process? Dan made the reference a few moments ago to the fact that I'm pretty much a stickler about calling this thing a leaders conference. And that's not me that's the stickler about that. In 1996, there were a couple of Matts in the room that were on that first team. And we were sitting around the table at UMB getting ready to talk about the future of the organization, and we were going to plan a leadership conference. And that's what they were there, all 10 or 12 of them, to help do and to think about. And so they kind of put their heads together for a minute or two, and then they said, "You know, we're not going to do that. We're not going to help you plan a leadership conference." And I said, "What do you mean you're not going to help? That's what you're here. You're getting a scholarship to be a part of this team. You're here to help with that process." One of the guys, name unshared, said, "You know, there was some yahoo like you," this is a direct quote, "some yahoo like you stood on a stage when I was a senior in high school and told me that I had arrived, I was a leader." And I don't know what that means. I've had all kinds of leadership training. I've been in 4-H, I've been in FFA, I've been in student council, all kinds of things. Let's just drop the ship. A paradigm went through our group. The idea of dropping the ship and thinking about leaders. So every one of you in this room that's a young person, when you came to AFA for the very first time, we never thought of you any other way other than you were a leader. What do we have to do as leaders? We got to constantly build our skills. Building our skills includes all kinds of things. This piece that we have announced tonight about the fellowship has been in the works in one way or another for 15 years. Just a couple of years ago, Nancy and Mark and I just said, okay, it's time to quit talking about it, quit designing, and let's make it work. This is our future as an organization in many ways. It'll be exciting. We have no idea how it's going to go and where it's going to go. But it is about that leader skill identification and packaging and marketing in such a way that those of you that are here as the corporate leaders will know your product. And that product will be able to articulate to you precisely where their talents, skills, and capacities to make a difference in your organization are identified. So, one of the traditions at AFA, every student advisory team, what do we do before we end the day? Word of the day. It's been going on for 20 years. What does that mean? Every single person around the room must pause and identify a word that's their word of the day, and then share that word and defend that word with the group. So, thank you for this recognition. I'm honored beyond any set of words. I will, before I finish my other thought, tell you that I had a dream about 2 weeks ago. This is not my favorite thing. Being up in front of a group and getting recognized, that's just not my favorite thing. And so I've been telling Mark and Nancy and Sandy I wasn't going to show up. And this is 4 weeks ago tonight. I had the most vivid, real dream that you can imagine. My family over here is all laughing because I've shared this dream with all of them. On Friday afternoon of conference, I was at conference and I was dreaming. I decided I need some fresh air, so I went out on the driveway, and there was this gorgeous motorcycle sitting out there. I've never owned a motorcycle. I've never really had any interest in owning a motorcycle. I've only ridden one with a few friends and didn't really care for it then, but I was enthralled with this beautiful motorcycle, and I got on it and I drove away, and I never made it back to dinner. I shared this with Tom Payne, and he thought I ought to get a Harley and put up here tonight, and when I'm done, just ride off. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do it with this. My word of the day. Entrepreneurialism. Now, Josh, I know that we've had a lot of debates about whether that's a real word or not. But I'm an Archie Bunker when it comes to words. Some of you are too young to even know who Archie Bunker is. But Archie had his own dictionary, had his own set of words. And so I'm kind of the same way. If there's not a word there, let's just create one. And it'll work because it's my word. And if we go look up the definition of entrepreneurialism, it's not my word. My word is my word. And it means one thing, that you have developed the talent and the skills and the ingenuity, the motivation to bloom where you're planted. It doesn't make any difference whether you're working for a big corporation, a little corporation, or Joel, you're out on the farm. Garrett, out on the farm. You got to bloom where you're planted. And you do that not by being everyday, ordinary person. You do that by being innovative and creative and motivated and thinking about all the ways that you can make a difference. Because the reason I really took this job was Mr. Kemper said to me, I haven't a clue what this ought to look like. That's your job. And if you aren't doing it in 6 months, I'll get somebody else. And he had a history of doing that. And 20 years later, I'm still doing it. Because the capacity, the opportunity to be planted somewhere where you could bloom and do those things to help young people, lives grow and change is the most rewarding thing I've ever had. So going back to the idea that be happy with your job. Find that passion that makes life worth living, and you'll never work a day of your life. Thank all of you. I want you to look around the room at all these logos. Students, these companies are some of the largest global countries in the world. They believe in you. They wouldn't invest their money and time and in the partnership if they didn't believe that you had the capacity to fill their needs. Companies, partners, look around the room. Here's 700 people that intend to take your job. And you better hang on to it because they're coming up fast and hard because they have been to AFA. Thank you very much.